Okay, so there's one more person coming. So my name is Naomi Reed. I am the speech and language therapist in the learning disability team at Forward Thinking Birmingham. So most of you will be parents or carers for a child who has a referral to the Forward Thinking Birmingham learning disability team. And for new people who've just arrived, just so you're aware, we're recording this part of the session, but we'll have a part at the end which isn't recorded, so we can ask questions and have discussions as well. I'm running a speech and language information session like this once a month, and they're going to be a sort of rolling programme on 3 themes. So it's going to be intensive interaction, which we did last month. This month it is visuals, so using visuals at home. And then next month in December, I'm going to be doing one on aided language displays and communication books. And then starting in January, I'll start with intensive interaction again. And after this session, I'm going to send lots of links and information out, and it'll also have a poster invite with all the dates and the information about the other information sessions. So if you want to if you'd like to attend any of those, you can just send me an email to let me know, or ask me today. And I think most of you are already on the mailing list for those as well, but I'll send those out afterwards. So today we're going to talk about visuals. So I'm going to start my PowerPoint. Okay, so can I check, can everyone see that on the screen? So today we're going to talk about using visuals at home, and we're going to talk about why we would use visuals, how they work, and then we'll go through specific visuals called objects of reference, now and next boards, now, next and later boards, visual timetables, and where to start. So why do we use visuals? Why, as speech and language therapists, do we recommend that we use visuals? So if your children are known to our team, it's likely that they have a learning disability, and it's also quite likely they may have autism. And these are 2 things that mean that you will struggle to understand spoken language. You may, some people may be the parents or care for children who have almost no understanding of verbal language, or some children may have fairly good basic understanding, but they struggle with kind of details and more abstract things. So, but generally a person with learning disability will always struggle with some aspect of language. So by using visuals, we can help children to adapt to changes in their routine. So if, so for example, if a child is used to the fact that they're going to get up, they're going to go on the bus, they're going to go to school, they'll play football later, then come back on the bus and have their tea. If there's going to be a change, so the child would have learned that day in, day out, week in, week out, they'll have learned that that structure and that routine to their day. However, if there's suddenly going to be a change, so there's a new guide on the bus, school is shut for the day, you know, they're not going to go to football, or they're going to go to their nan's for tea instead, all those sorts of things. Rather than just explaining verbally, we can give them a visual timetable, or use visuals of some kind to help them remember that there's going to be a change to their day, which helps them to understand it, makes it a lot less scary, and just means that the day is kind of more expected and more enjoyable for them. So the second point is reducing anxiety. So if a child really understands what's going to happen next and what's happening to them through their day, it makes them less anxious. It can help a child to follow instructions. So if you need to tell them, you know, brush your teeth, put some toothpaste on, you know, pick up your brush, put some toothpaste on, brush your teeth, and then pop it back in the pot, put your pajamas on, and then come back downstairs. Some children might really struggle to remember all of those things, and particularly once they've started one task, remembering, trying to keep that verbal information in their head for what comes next, that can be quite tricky. So having visuals to help them follow a sequence. And so, for example, brushing their teeth, or getting dressed, or you know, putting their things away after breakfast, and it can also lead to help them with their independence as well. So we've got things like transitioning to new tasks, learning new words. So words are really difficult to remember because they're said and then they're gone. But if you've got a visual that helps you remember the word, it can help that verbal words stick in your head, basically. It can help you to learn new words. It can help children to feel empowered and have a sense of control over their time. For children who struggle with verbal understanding what's happening next, understanding instructions, they can really struggle to think, actually, what am I doing today? and they can feel a bit lost. Whereas if children really have a full understanding about the layout of their day and what's going to happen to them next, again, it gives them a sense of control and reduces anxiety. It can even help a child to retell what's happened in their day. We all, even children without learning disability, parents will often say, you know, at the end of school, I say, what have you done? And they can never answer me. Whereas actually, if you use visuals, so maybe you look at their school bag and say, oh, there's some art. I think you've done some art today. Or there's your PE kit. You must have done some PE. You know, it's just tools to help them recount things to you. And again, just in terms of completing tasks, that can help them be motivated to complete a task and overall just become more independent. So there's lots of different uses for visuals along any sort of level of learning disability. So visuals work because they are permanent. So verbal language happens very quickly and then it disappears. So for example, if I say, oh, to make those pancakes, you get some flour, you put it through the sieve, you add the milk, then you put an egg in, then you stir it all up, make sure the pan gets really, really hot with some oil in it, and then you pour it in. When it's gone brown on one side, you flip it over, and then you put it on the plate, put some lemon and sugar on, and then you're done. Now, unless you already know how to make pancakes, or if you have a really, really good memory, it's unlikely that you'll remember all of that because it's in the past, the language has already happened, and it's really abstract and you've got to kind of keep it all in your head. Whereas if I gave you a recipe, so you were looking at a website with the recipe written out, or you had it printed out, or even if you had symbols or photos, or if you could watch someone else do it, it would make the sequence and the instructions a lot more concrete, and it's easier to remember. And you could also, if you forgot, go back again and look at your visual to remind yourself of what happens next. There's also no emotional load. So, for example, if a child gets quite anxious before they go to school and they know that they'll always forget, you know, to pick up their lunchbox, or they'll always be late brushing their teeth or something like that, having maybe a parent say, come on, get your bag, let's go, the bus is already here. The child might actually just be listening to an angry tone of voice, or just getting more and more stressed because they know they're being shouted at. Whereas if they've got a visual timetable that they can keep going back to, there's sort of no emotion and stress associated with it. So the child is able to be calmer and to understand what's happening. And also visuals will work if they are consistent. So we're going to have a look at some visuals. So we have visuals in everyday life, basically. So you might recognize lots of these. These are quite American ones, obviously. But we use things like flags to represent countries. We've got logos for social media and McDonald's. We've got visuals on our phones. We've got sticky notes. We've got road markings, things that represent kind of medical emergencies, all those sorts of things. And we know them because we see them day in, day out. And here's an example of, so say you've gone to a restaurant in Greece, and that you're given the menu, unless you already know how to read Greek, which would be very, very impressive. I know I definitely can't. I would have no idea. Maybe I'd be able to tell from the visual that the menu is kind of broken up. Maybe I'd be able to say maybe it's starters, mains and puddings, and I'm not really sure what's at the end. That's the only thing that would vaguely give me a clue as to what different foods are on this menu. However, if you add in visuals, now I know exactly what's on this menu. I know that there's starters, which are like soup or chips, or maybe that's prawns or seafood. I know the mains are chicken, fish and beef. I know the puddings are ice cream or cake or cheese. And I know that I can also have tea and coffee. So I can look at that and I have no idea what the words are, but because there's visuals, I know exactly what it is. And I'm sure everyone here is familiar with these visuals, and that's because they're consistent. On every single fire escape or escape route, there is the picture of the little person kind of running out of the door. Every pharmacy, every first aid kit, every medical box, there's the white cross on the green background. On every fire extinguisher, there's the red symbol with the fire extinguisher and the flames. On every set of roadworks, there's the person digging in the triangle shape. On pretty much every set of toilets in a public place, you have the symbol for men's toilets, women's toilets and disabled toilets. And we know this because it is really consistent. We see it all the time. And that's a similar way that we need to use visuals with the children that we are parents of and that we care for. If we choose to use a symbol or a visual of any kind, we just need to keep it as consistent as possible, and they will be able to learn them. Another way that visuals work is that they are easier. They're much easier than trying to understand verbal language or even to read something. And that's why on aeroplanes and in other emergency situations, there's often diagrams of what we do, because in that moment, so if there was an emergency with a plane where you had to get out, or you had to do an emergency landing, it's far more likely that you're going to look in that kind of heightened sense of stress and fear. It's far easier to just look at the pictures and know what to do than sit and try and read a paragraph about what you've got to do. And this is, again, is really relevant for the children that we're parents and carers for. Having any sort of learning disability or autism or complex needs means that life is just a little bit more scary and stressful for you, particularly when you're being given an instruction and you're used to not really understanding what's going on. And also it's likely that you may experience more kind of stress and anxiety, and maybe even periods of illness as well. And all of these things can reduce our ability to understand language. And I'm sure we've all had this experience, and you're thinking, I just want to go home. I just really need to go home and have a nap before I have to pick the kids up from school, or these sorts of things. And then you meet someone in a supermarket who just wants to chat away with you and tell you all about their holiday. I can guarantee everyone's been in that situation where you're just not listening to the other person. You're not taking any information because you just feel so tired and you're so distracted. Or likewise, if you're really poorly or if you're really stressed, it's likely that you really struggle to kind of take in information. And it's exactly the same for the children that we're parents or carers for. So simplifying our communication is always a bonus. It will always help them to understand what's happening and have all those benefits that we saw before around reducing anxiety, helping them to understand their day and helping them learn language and be more independent. Okay, so we're going to start talking about objects of reference. So there's a few things on here. So I'm going to use an example of some objects of reference. So I've got a big bag with me. So I wonder if I tell you what I did this morning using some objects of reference, see if you'll be able to understand. So this morning, let's see, I had a cup of coffee. And there's a spoon in there as well. I had some cereal. I'm going to say I need to retrieve one more thing. Here we go. Obviously, I can't hold up my laptop because I'm recording on my laptop, but I might hold this up to show that I did some work. And also, I filled up a hot water bottle because my office is really, really cold. So I've got some objects of reference there that kind of show you what I did this morning. And because they're really universal, they're really consistent, everyone knows that a mug means some sort of hot drink, doesn't it? And a bowl and a spoon, particularly in the morning, means cereal. And an iPad on a work day probably means that you're doing some work. And filling up a hot water bottle means that you're cold. So those are all objects of reference that I can use to kind of explain, or if you saw these out on the table, you kind of know, oh, it's morning and Naomi's doing some work. Okay, and I've also got some objects of reference to suggest what I'm going to do after I finish work today. So, let's see if you can tell. I've got, first of all, I'm going to I've got a plate and some cutlery. So I think you can probably guess that I'm going to have my tea. And then I've got a yoga mat that suggests that I'm going to go and do some yoga, hopefully, which will be very nice. So there's an example of using some symbols that are well known and universally understood that can suggest an activity and suggest extra information. Okay, so objects of reference. So those are some of my objects of reference that I use to tell you about what I did this morning. And I'm just going to show you some other objects of reference. So here's a school that have almost a contents page of the different objects of reference that they use in school. So there's a plastic banana for snack. There's a ribbon, and I think it says creativity. So that might be for art and craft. There's a toy car to show you're going to play with toy cars. There's a toilet roll for going to the toilet. There's a book for reading stories. There's some textured card for messy play. There's a rolling pin for Play-Doh. There's some pretend food for the home corner. And then also for group time, they've got something which is slightly more abstract. So they've got those kind of fuzzy balls that are fixed together in a circle. So some things obviously are a little bit more abstract that don't necessarily have an automatic object for, things that we call natural objects of reference. So that's an interesting use of something slightly more abstract. And the idea is if you use it again and again and again and again at group time, the child will start to learn this is the thing that means it's going to be group time. So some things on here are what we call natural objects of reference, and there's probably lots that you have in your life. So for example, the things to do with my morning and afternoon routine, so my mug for coffee, my bowl for cereal, my yoga mat for yoga. There's probably lots of natural objects of reference in your child's life as well. So their shoes are probably a signal that they're going outside. Their coat in the winter is also probably a sign that they're going to go outside. The car keys probably means they're going to go out in the car. Getting a plate and a bowl out probably means they're going to have some snack. There's lots and lots of things that lots of objects in your child's life that they probably already associate with something, and it's about building those things up. So here's a few example things. Starting off with objects of reference, it's recommended that you just start off with a few key activities and places that your child goes to in their everyday routine. So typical things might be bath time, going out in the garden, going to the park, going to the shops and going to Nan's house, for example. So bath time, you might want to choose one of the bath toys that they can hold and look at, and you can say, okay, it's time for the bath, and they look at it and think, oh, this is the thing that goes in the bath. Oh, it must mean that I'm going to have a bath. Or, you know, you could give them a towel, or if they have a little kind of dressing gown towel or something like that, you can give that to them, something that they already associate with bath time. And then again, every single time you're telling them it's bath time, ready to go upstairs, you always give them that item so they know what to expect, they know what's going to happen next. Going out in the garden. So here I've just got the example of some toy spades. So there might already be objects that are related to the garden. So they might have a spade for digging. You might have a kind of flower or a branch or something like that. I mean, obviously a very small one, something that they know is to do with going outside, or that could even be their wellies. But do be aware when you're using objects of reference which are maybe not going to be used all year round. So for example, wellies and coat for going outside. If it's the middle of the summer and they're going to go in the paddling pool, you wouldn't put their wellies and coat on. So it's worth just thinking about things that you're definitely going to use all year round, no matter kind of what season it is or where they're going. Going to the park. So if they need to go in the car, it might just be the car keys. Or you might want to decide on, let's see, a kind of, you know, a certain, maybe like a lunchbox that they take to the park, or a picnic blanket that you take to the park and sit on, anything that's kind of related to the park. And then again, if you choose something that isn't always going to be used at the park, but you can just keep using it as that object of reference. Going to the shops, you might want to get a shopping bag to show them, or again, the car keys to show that they're going in the car. And then from there, use an object of reference to show that it's going to be the shops. And then Nan's house. The one thing I could think of is maybe Nan likes to wear colourful scarves. So you could have a scarf to show Nan, or maybe anything that they associate with going to Nan's house. You know, maybe there's a particular type of toy they play with there, or a particular food that they have there. That's the kind of thing you could show them. So that's objects of reference. Are there any questions or comments so far? We'll have time at the end to chat about and ask any questions in particular, but is there anything at the moment that anyone wants any clarification on in terms of objects of reference? Okay. Oh. Hello, is that a question?
Yeah, can we not use visual? Can you hear me?
Amina, it's difficult to hear you. Do you want to ask a question again?
Yeah, can we not use visual card?
I'm really, really sorry, Amina. I can't hear you at all. You could put your question in the comments, in the chat box, if that's any easier for you. I think I heard you say card, which might, you might have been asking, can they be symbols and cards and things like that? And we're going to come on to that next. Okay. Okay, then, so I'll just carry on. And if you've got another question or comment, please feel free to put it in the chat box. That's fine. And we can always have a chat at the end as well.
How do I go to the chat box?
Okay, well, this is a good example because there is a visual for the chat box. Somewhere on your screen, there's probably going to be kind of 3 dots, or there might be a little section of symbols. There's one symbol which is kind of 2 people. There's another symbol which is a person raising their hand, and there's another symbol which is a speech bubble with 2 lines in, and that's the one to click on to get to the chat box. And that's quite handy because that's just another example of universal visuals that are helpful to use. Okay, so I'll just continue with the presentation. Okay. Right then. So the next one we're going to talk about is now and next. So now and next boards. This might be something that your child already uses in school or has used in the past, or something that might have been recommended to you by your core worker from Forward Thinking Birmingham, or a speech and language therapist in the past, or a teacher. And the idea of a now and next board is that we're showing the child really clearly what's happening now and what's happening next. So it's a really it's a kind of one of the first steps to a child starting to understand something that's going to happen in the future and kind of being ready and prepared for it. And we generally use symbols on now and next boards, but you can also use an object of reference as well. So if they're kind of small enough, you could stick some Velcro on and stick them on your now and next board. And there's just kind of 3 different types. Some people call them kind of now and then, or sometimes they have slightly different names, particularly if you're looking on kind of American websites or videos or anything, but generally they're now and next. Okay, so I've got a couple of examples of now and next boards that I can show you. So I've got an example here of a now and next board, and I've got 2. My symbols are very small, unfortunately. These are just my example symbols. So I've got an example of now is taking medication, so having a tablet, and then next is iPad. So in this situation, I'm maybe also using this a little bit like a reward chart. So there's something that's a bit unpleasant, first of all, followed by something rewarding. So it just helps that child to think like, oh, I've got to do this now, but next is going to be this really, really fun thing. And what you can also do is something that when you've laminated something is that you can also just draw on it using a whiteboard marker. So if you didn't have your symbols for tablet and iPad, I shouldn't have chosen tablet and iPad because they almost sound like the same thing, don't they? But if you've got a kind of medicine bottle that always looks the same, and then next they're going to play on the iPad, you can always just draw them on. So it can look like that. So you can show your child. First of all, we're going to take our tablets and then going to play on the iPad. And always think about what's the most useful thing for your child to know. So is it that it's going to be the iPad, or is it the thing they're excited about is the Peppa Pig program that you're going to watch. So in that situation, I shouldn't have chosen Peppa Pig because Peppa Pig is very difficult to draw. Is that how you draw Peppa Pig? I've no idea. Here we go. Please don't laugh at my picture of Peppa Pig. There it is. So in this case, it's not necessarily the iPad, but it's the fact that it's going to be Peppa Pig that's really exciting for this child. So, you know, now let's have your tablet. I know, let's just take it now, but then it's Peppa Pig. Are you ready? And you could even, thinking of objects of reference, you could even have the iPad there ready, and you could also maybe have the medication the child is taking. You pop them both down the table. So medication out, and then it's Peppa Pig. Then it's Peppa Pig on the iPad. Because especially if a child's got to do something that's slightly unpleasant, again, thinking about when your language abilities and your communication abilities reduce when you're stressed or anxious about something. Without any visuals, if you say, come on, just take this now, you can have your iPad next. All the child is looking at is that medication, thinking, oh, I don't want it. Whereas if you've got a visual and they can see what's going to happen next, it may just help them be less anxious and be able to achieve this thing so they can get on to the next thing. And this doesn't always have to be used in a kind of reward sort of way. It could still be two exciting things. So you might have, you know, playing on the park, and then going home to watch TV, or having your dinner, going to your nanny's house, things like that, just to kind of show the child this is what's happening now, but next it's going to be this. And what I generally recommend is when you're using now and next is to always update, and this is key for any sort of visual timetable as well, is to always update it as soon as the activity is finished. So as soon as the child has taken their medication, say, yeah, that's it, finished. That's finished. And now we're going to play on the iPad. And then you might put kind of what's happening next after that as well. So, for example, we're going to play on the iPad, then later on we're going to go outside. So the child is always kind of orientated. They know what's going to happen. This is what I'm doing now, and this is the thing that's coming next. Okay. So we're kind of increasing in complexity as we're going along. So the next thing is now, next, and then boards. So I think you can see quite clearly that this is just the next step on from now and next. I think I've dropped mine on the floor, so 1 second, let's go and get it. Oh. My symbol. So this is just getting slightly more abstract. So you can see on these we've got a now, next, and then. We've got another one which is what am I going to do today, now, next, and then. And also now, next, and then have symbols as well. And you might look at those and think those are really, really abstract. You know, those are too difficult to understand because just even the concepts of now, next, and then are abstract concepts. So the symbols are going to be quite abstract. So it's not going to be, you know, a picture of an iPad or, you know, a picture of an apple or an orange. But it's still worth always symbolising and having these so the child can keep seeing them. And again, if they're consistent, the child will start to learn them. And it means that in the future, we can support their language and support them to understand and even communicate more abstract things. Okay, so I've got a now, next, and later board here. And on this one, it's exactly the same as now and next. It just gives the child a little bit more information about what's coming next. So now we're going to read a book. Next, we're going to watch TV. And then later, we're going to go on the bus. So this is particularly helpful for children who maybe get a bit worried about things that are happening later in the day, or children who are asking lots and lots and lots of questions. So, for example, a child who knows they're going to go on the bus today, they're really, really excited about it, and then maybe keep asking, bus, 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 going on the bus, when's the bus, where's the bus? You can say, oh, well, we're going to read a book first, then we're going to watch TV, and then we're going on the bus. And each time they ask you, you can always relate back to here again, just to help kind of orientate them as to what's happening in their day. And again, we want once something is finished, so once you finish reading a book, We say, okay, now we're watching TV, and then we're going to go on the bus. This one's got blue tack instead, so it's slightly more awkward to stick. And you know, then we're going to go outside, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going on the bus to the shops, something like that. Okay, so as you can see, this is getting just slightly more abstract and slightly more steps to our visual timetable as we go along. So the next step after now, next and then are visual timetables, so a full visual timetable. And visual timetables can be laid out either left to right in the direction that we read in, or they can be laid out from top to bottom, and either is fine. It's kind of whatever you decide to use, basically. So you can see a little boy here on the right has got a visual timetable that goes from top to bottom, and the example we've got here is from left to right. And visual timetables can get as complicated as you need, and a really, really good practice right from the outset is to have a finished box. Is to have a finished box. So you can see on the right here, we've got a visual timetable with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things on it. So that I think that's almost a child's full school day. And you can always break this up. You could have one just for the morning routine, up to lunch, and then you can have one for the afternoon, up till tea, and then have one for the evening. You can just kind of experiment and see how many symbols your child can kind of cope with, or how many objects of reference stuck to it they can cope with. But really good practice is to have that finished box that they can put any symbols that are finished with, any activities that are done, they can put them in the finished box. So I've got an example here. So this is one that goes from top to bottom. So the child's day is starting off with, so this is a very, very simple one. The child's day is starting off with playing on the iPad, and once that's finished, that would go in the finished box. Then they're going to have some lunch. And once that's finished, it would go in the finished box. And then in the afternoon, they're going to go out and play. And then after that, it goes in the finished box. And then it's dinner, and that would go in the finished box. And then obviously you kind of then put on things for the rest of the day. And the idea is that if you take the items off, so these things are all stuck on by Velcro, or you could use blue tack, is that the child can go back if they need a reminder about what's happening in the day, or if you need to help them remember what's happening in their day, you can always take them back to here, and it's just really obvious. Okay, there's nothing there, this must be, that's what I'm doing now, and that's what's happening next. So that's why it's best practice to always take something off when there's a transition. And it's also a really good visual kind of activity for the child realizing it's changing. So play is finished and now it's dinner. I know things are going to change because we're going back to our visual timetable. We're taking something off, we're putting it in the visuals box, and I know that the activity has changed, and now I know that it's dinner. So it also just helps with when transitions are happening, basically. So that's using a finished box. Okay. So there's lots of different visual timetables that you can use, and you can make them as simple or as complicated as you need, basically according to your child that you're the parent or carer for. So there's an example here on the left which has got kind of all the days of the school week. So it's showing, yes, there's going to be school every single day, and then after school on a Monday you're going to band practice. It's very American. After school on a Tuesday you're going to go straight home. After school on a Wednesday you're going to go to football. After school on a Thursday, you're going to go home, and after school on a Friday, you'll go swimming. So again, that's really useful for children, just to kind of picture their week and help them to know what to expect. And also, again, for children who maybe are anxious about a certain thing coming up, or maybe are really excited about a certain activity that comes up, which leads them to ask about it all the time and want to know. You know, you might have children who kind of say, where's Nanny? When we're going to Nanny's house? Football, going on the bus. You can always take them back, say, yes, you are going on the bus, but you're going on the bus on, Friday when it's time for swimming, etc. And then the one on the right is quite useful as well, because you can because it's got the strip that goes down, you can just stick as many things as you need on for each day. So I think this visual timetable has all the things that are just important for that day. So the main thing on the main thing on Sunday is going to be church. The main thing on a Monday is going to be school. The main thing on Tuesday is going to dance after school. The main thing on Wednesday is going to McDonald's and then going to therapy. You can put on all the things that are kind of important for the child to remember and to know about. So I've got a couple of weekly timetables here. So I've got a simpler one. So this has all the days of the week. And the idea is, so unfortunately I don't have any school symbols at the moment, but you would maybe have school on all the school days, and then home on the Saturday and Sunday. And then on this column you could put, after school on Wednesday you're going to see the nurse, and even in the morning on a Friday you're going to go see the doctor, for example. So it just alerts the child to kind of important things that are happening in their week, and maybe also unexpected things that are going to happen in their week that if you that they maybe need lots of preparation for. So, going to see the nurse after school on a Wednesday and going to see the doctor in the morning on a Friday, those sorts of things. So that's a fairly simple one. I hope you can see that one clearly. And then I've got a much more complicated one, which is here. So this has got the days of the week down the side. This is kind of like a school timetable. So it's got Monday to Friday, and across the top it goes, it kind of marks the hours all the way from 9 till 3:15. So, and obviously it's got lunch down the middle, and it's just showing the child. So you might put their lessons in there. Again, if there's going to be a change in routine, so on Thursday morning you're going to see the nurse, on Tuesday you're going to see a speech therapist, all those sorts of things. But again, your teacher, your Forward Thinking Birmingham core worker and a speech and language therapist can always advise you on how complicated and how simple to make visuals for your child once they get to this kind of level. So you might be thinking, those visuals using symbols and things look really nice, but where would I find symbols to use? So you can have a go at making visuals yourself at home. So 3 of the best resources that I find are, there's one called Easy on the Eye, which was made by an NHS trust, and I'll send all the resources out afterwards and the links to the websites. There is, let's have a look. So Easy on the Eye is here. So it's a big image library of things. So I can just type in bus, and there you go. There's kind of lots of, so there's one for bus, catching a bus. There's a bus on daily living skills, all those sorts of things. And I might put in breakfast. Let's see what it comes up with. There we go. So we've got breakfast, different types of breakfast that you might have. There's also the Noun project. So these ones are generally a bit more useful for adults with learning disability, because they're fairly grown up. They're nice and kind of stylish and black and white. So there's all the symbols that come up for bath. Maybe I'll put in breakfast again. There you go. So lots of different types of symbols for different types of breakfast, and they're quite nice. And they're also, a lot of them are very good in terms of if someone has a visual impairment, and there's lots of, in terms of different cultures, there's lots of different types of breakfasts and things like that. So those ones are quite useful. And there's also widget. So the symbols that I've been showing you are widget symbols, and these ones are probably the best symbols that are out there, because they're designed by experts in communication, and the symbols also have a sort of grammar to them, so they can be used in a really simple way and also used in a really complex way as well. And they also have software that you can make symbolized documents with. The downside is that widget, the software is quite expensive, or if you get a subscription, again, it's still fairly expensive. It's likely to be the one that your child's school uses, and we definitely use it, and Forward Thinking Birmingham and lots of speech and language therapists use it. So there are free resources. So if I click on healthcare, There's lots of free resources, so communication charts, flashcards and social stories, see early years and home. So there's things like, making an alphabet boat, back to school, learning colours, all these sorts of things. So there's less things in terms of being able to pick specific symbols, but there are lots of free things that you can use on there. And of course, the last way that you can make things is basically by asking us. Your core workers will be able to make visual timetables for you. They'll be able to print off symbols for you, and also your speech and language therapist and your child's school as well. We're all here to kind of help you with these things, and should have access to these symbols that we can support you with. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to mention is just in terms of using photos versus symbols. So you'll see quite a few publications that suggest, you start with objects because they're the easiest to understand, then you move on to photos, and then you move on to simple symbols, and then kind of more complicated symbols. But it's definitely worth being aware that there can be some pitfalls to using photos, and particularly if the child that you're the parent or carer of has autism as well, it can be really tricky. Kind of using symbols can be certain pitfalls. So what I would generally recommend is, if you need a visual representation of a really specific person, so members of the family, friends, specific pets, or maybe specific places that you're going, have a photo of those things. That's really, really useful. But if you're talking about general things, so you might have Sparky, your dog, I would recommend having a very specific photo of Sparky the dog, because there's only one Sparky the dog, he's your family pet. But if you're talking about dogs generally, I would have a symbol of a dog, because it's a lot less abstract. It's more abstract, and it's easier to what we call generalize. It's easier to say this symbol of a dog means any dog, whereas the photo of a dog looks like a very specific dog. Or if you take a photo of breakfast and you show that photo to your child, so it's breakfast time, particularly if your child is autistic, when breakfast arrives and the breakfast doesn't look exactly like the one on the photo, this one's beans and toast, but this is cereal, or this one's Cocoa Pops, but I've got Rice Krispies. You can cause some confusion and even distress with some children who get very kind of fixated on particular things. Whereas a symbol, it's easier to understand. This represents the general concept of it. And this also mirrors the way that we learn language. So as a young baby, mum just means that one person. Whereas when you start nursery and you start school, you start to realise, oh, the word mum actually means lots of people's mums. And because there's that kind of one word for it, that's basically how we learn language. And our friend Mohammed is our one friend Mohammed, but the word friend can mean lots of other children as well, whereas our best friend is we would use a photo for that child, whereas the concept of friend we would use a symbol for, just like we use the proper name and we use a general kind of noun to describe everybody else in your class. I hope that makes sense. That can often be a tricky thing to explain, but it's just worth remembering that it's important not to only go with photos, and it can seem a bit strange using symbols that look like they're more complicated, more difficult to understand, but actually in the long term, using symbols when we use visuals is much more useful for our children, because it can be a lot less confusing and is easier to generalise the learning, and also it helps with language development as well. Okay, so that was a presentation about visuals. So we looked at how visuals are helpful and why they work, because they are permanent and they're something you can go back to and look at again and again, rather than a spoken word which is said and then gone. And if you have a learning disability, it's likely that you're going to really struggle to recall and keep those sounds in your head and work out what they mean, then remember and hold on to the information. If you've got a picture that you can keep coming back to, it will help you to remember, and it leads to things like reducing anxiety, helping the child know what's happening next, helping with transitions, and even leading to things like supporting independence, following sequences, and even language learning itself. So we went through objects of reference and how there's lots of natural objects of reference in the world, and how to start choosing 3 or 4 simple objects of reference that we can use with our child. We then looked at now and next. So now and next boards that you can put a symbol on, or you could even just draw onto if you've got something laminated. Adding extra information by building up to a now, next and then a board with 3 things, and remembering that as soon as something's finished, we take it off and move everything down the row and add something on to the end. We then looked at visual timetables. So you can have one which is kind of a whole day, or a morning, or an afternoon, or an evening, or a particular routine. So for brushing teeth, or going to the toilet, or getting dressed. Slightly more complicated is maybe a simplified weekly timetable with just 1 or 2 things happening on each day. Then you can even build up to a much more complicated visual timetable like this, which is a school timetable, which has all the days of the school week and all the times. And you might put in kind of lessons or particular appointments that are coming up. And again, if you think about it, if anyone uses a calendar on their phone or a paper calendar at home on the wall, these are exactly the same thing. It's visuals, and it's ways for us to remember more things, basically. It's almost like an external memory. We can write it down on a calendar on the wall, or we can put it on our phone, and we don't have to kind of keep it in our head. We can come back to it and be reminded by it. Okay, so we have more speech and language information sessions coming up next month, and if you'd like to find out more about those, you can just email me and just reply to the email that I send. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.